Imagine a threat. Usually in geopolitics, a threat is a very physical thing.
Right, it's tangible.
Exactly. We'll target your bases, we'll sink your ships.
Right.
The standard language of warfare we've heard for decades.
Well, what happens when that language shifts?
Yeah.
What if the target isn't steel, but capital?
It changes the entire calculus, doesn't it?
Completely. You stop playing a game of military risk and start playing a very high-stakes game of Monopoly.
Except the board is literally on fire.
Exactly. And that is precisely where we find ourselves today. It's Tuesday, January 27, 2026.
And if you've been looking at the news, you've probably seen the big red banners, tensions rising in the Middle East. But let's be honest, tensions rising is kind of the default setting for the region.
Yeah, that's not the real story here.
No. We're here today to unpack a very specific and I think very unusual warning that has just come out of Tehran.
It's a really complex web. It involves a U.S. aircraft carrier, something called a shadow fleet of oil tankers, and a warning from an Iranian cleric that puts the entire economic system of the region in the crosshairs.
So welcome to the deep dive. We've got a whole stack of sources in front of us: military reports, treasury sanctions, diplomatic cables.
And our mission today is to get past those headlines.
Right, to really understand the mechanics of this standoff, because when you hear a phrase like $1 trillion warning, you need to know exactly whose money is on the line and why this particular Tuesday might be a real turning point.
And maybe more importantly, why this could signal a huge shift in how modern wars are even fought. We are looking at a collision between economic warfare and, actual kinetic force.
So let's jump in. This didn't just happen out of the blue. There's a sequence of events, and it really started with an announcement from the White House, from President Trump.
Right. The president announced that a significant amount of U.S. military assets were moving toward Iran. This wasn't subtle. It was a loud, very public signal of force projection.
And normally the response to that is pretty standard. A spokesperson issues a statement, maybe there's a speech at the UN.
But not this time. Tehran's response was different.
Very different.
The response came from a senior Iranian cleric, Mohammad Javad Haja Ali Akbari, and he was speaking at Friday prayers in Tehran.
I want to pause on that because for anyone who doesn't follow the region closely, Friday prayers isn't just a religious service, is it?
No, not in this political context. The Friday prayer sermon in Tehran is a major platform. It's where the regime often communicates its most serious strategic positions to the public.
It's policy as much as theology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Akbari didn't just say, we will fight back. He warned that if the U.S. attacks, Iran will target U.S. assets and this is the word that changes everything, investments across the whole region.
That one word, investments, that's what jumped out at me.
He was explicit. He said, and I'm paraphrasing the translation, that any U.S. attack would make American investments worth trillions of dollars a legitimate target for their missiles.
That feels like a massive escalation in just rhetoric. I mean, we're used to hearing about military bases.
Hardened bunkers, airfields, right?
Places designed to get shot at, but threatening investments sounds so much broader.
Oh, it broadens the battlefield dramatically. He's telling the United States, and maybe more importantly, America's allies in the Gulf, that this war won't just be fought on the front lines.
It'll be fought in the business districts.
The oil refineries, the infrastructure projects, the places where U.S. capital is actually parked.
So the huge question then is, why now? Is this just a bluff to save face because there's a U.S. carrier group steaming towards them? Or is this a sign they think combat is actually imminent?
To answer that, I think we have to look at what's physically happening.
Yeah.
On the ground and on the water. The why is almost always hidden in the what.
Okay, so let's get into the hardware. You mentioned assets moving. What do we actually have in the region this week?
The main piece of hardware is the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. It has officially arrived in the Middle East.
Which is just a massive projection of power.
A huge one. You're talking about a literal floating air force.
And it's not just one ship, right? People hear carrier and they think one boat.
No. It's a strike group. You have the carrier with dozens of aircraft Super Hornets, electronic warfare jets. But it's also surrounded by guided missile destroyers, cruisers. It's a mobile fortress.
And the Iranians are obviously not ignoring it.
Not at all. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they released their own video footage of the carrier.
So they're watching it closely.
Very closely.
Yeah.
And their statement was chilling. They said their finger is on the trigger and that their forces are in a state of high combat readiness.
Finger on the trigger. I mean, it doesn't get much more tense than that. But while all eyes are on the carrier, there's this other battle happening that I think is, frankly, underreported, the battle over the shadow fleet.
This is such a crucial piece of the puzzle. If you want to know why Iran is threatening investments, you have to look at what the U.S. is doing to Iran's wallet.
Right. At the same time the carrier arrives, the US Treasury drops a hammer.
A big one. The Treasury sanctioned 9 ships and 8 companies. And these aren't random vessels. They're accused of being part of a shadow fleet.
Okay, we need to unpack that term. It sounds like something from a spy movie. What is a shadow fleet?
It's basically a survival mechanism for Iran.
Yeah.
Since the sanctions on their oil exports got really tight, they've relied on this network of aging tankers.
Okay.
These ships often turn their location transponders off. They fly flags of convenience from countries with lax rules. They'll even do ship-to-ship oil transfers in the middle of the ocean to hide where the crude is from.
So they're essentially smuggling their own oil to keep the lights on.
Precisely. It's how they get around the global banking system. And the entities that were just sanctioned, they're based in India, Oman, and the UAE.
So they're neighbors.
Exactly. And the U.S. is accusing them of moving hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Iranian oil and petrochemicals.
So let's connect the dots. The U.S. isn't just sending military muscle. They are, at the exact same time, trying to sever the financial lifelines keeping the regime afloat.
It's a pincer movement. Military pressure from the sea and economic strangulation from the Treasury. So when that cleric, Ali Akbari, threatens investments, he's directly responding to this economic attack.
He's saying, you come for our oil revenue, we come for your financial interests.
It's tit for tat, but with potentially catastrophic collateral damage.
And that brings us to the whole definition of targets. If I'm a U.S. ally in the region and I'm hosting U.S. investment, am I now a target?
And that is the terrifying ambiguity of the threat. Investments could mean American-owned skyscrapers in Dubai. It could mean joint ventures in Saudi Arabia's energy sector. It implies any country hosting U.S. capital is now on the hook.
Which just complicates things for everyone. It's not a simple Washington-Tehran stare-down anymore.
No, the whole neighborhood is getting pulled in, the regional chessboard is incredibly crowded, and other players are making moves.
We have to talk about Turkey.
Yes, the Turkish foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, he had a pretty serious warning just yesterday.
He did. He basically said there are signs that Israel is actively looking for a chance to attack Iran. Wait, so Turkey is worried Israel might use this American buildup as cover to launch their own strike?
That's the implication. And Turkey sees that as a massive trigger for regional instability. If Israel strikes, this whole thing explodes. It's not a U.S.-Iran war anymore.
It becomes a regional conflagration. And if that happens, we have to bring in the proxy network. You can't talk about Iran without talking about Hezbollah.
Hezbollah is the X factor. The group in Lebanon was very explicit. They stated that if Iran is attacked, they will join the fight.
Okay, so let's game this out for a second. The U.S. strikes Iran. Iran strikes U.S. investments in, say, Dubai. Israel strikes Iran. Then Hezbollah strikes Israel.
It's a domino effect. And that is exactly why this trillion-dollar warning is so dangerous. It almost guarantees that the conflict spreads. It turns a bilateral fight into a multi-front war.
It's the unity of fields concept.
Precisely. You can't hit one front without activating all the others.
But, and this is where it gets really fascinating, not everyone in the region is getting on board with the U.S. plan. We saw a really interesting pivot from the UAE.
This was the surprise of the week for a lot of people. The UAE Foreign Ministry came out and stated very clearly that they will not allow their territory or their airspace to be used for any attacks on Iran.
That is huge. I mean, the UAE is a major U.S. partner. They host American forces at Al Dhafra Air Base. And now they're saying, you can park your jets here, but you can't fly them from here to attack Tehran.
Exactly. It's a massive logistical problem for U.S. military planners. If you can't use the airspace of your closest allies, your strike corridors get much, much narrower.
You become more predictable.
Far more predictable. And you have to fly longer, more complicated routes.
So why do you think the UAE is drawing this line right now?
It's self-preservation. Remember the threat. Trillions of dollars of investments.
Right.
The UAE is a global investment hub. Their entire economy is built on being a safe harbor for capital.
They can't afford to have missiles raining down on Dubai.
Of course not. They're trying to inoculate themselves from the fallout.
It's a smart move, but it really shows the limits of U.S. power, doesn't it? You can have the biggest carrier in the world, but if your friends won't let you use their driveway, it complicates things.
And the rest of the world is definitely taking notice. This isn't just theoretical anymore. Look at commercial aviation.
Right. Air France and KLM.
Both have canceled flights to Israel, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia for the weekend.
But I want to underscore that they canceled flights to the UAE and Saudi Arabia too, not just Israel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the real-world impact hitting home. When major airlines stop flying somewhere, it means their risk assessment teams, who are, very conservative, have decided the airspace is just too dangerous.
It validates the threat. It shows the international community believes we're right on the edge of actual kinetic action.
It raises insurance premiums. It disrupts supply chains. It's the first ripple of the exact economic damage that Akbari warned about.
So we have the pieces on the board: the carrier, the sanctions, the warnings from Turkey and Hezbollah, and now the UAE closing its airspace. Let's talk strategy. What's the end game here? What is the actual strategy behind this investment threat?
Well, Iran is playing a game of asymmetric deterrence. They know they can't win a conventional war against the USS Abraham Lincoln.
They just can't match that firepower.
Not head-to-head. So instead, they target the wallet. They target the political will of America's allies.
By threatening economic chaos, they hope to make the cost of a U.S. strike too high for Washington's partners to even stomach.
That's the play. They want the UAE, they want Saudi Arabia to get on the phone in the White House and say, don't do it. The cost to us is just too high.
So it's leverage. They're weaponizing the global economy against the U.S. military.
Absolutely. And then there's the domestic part of it, the face-saving we mentioned.
Right. The regime has to look strong at home.
You can't just have a U.S. carrier sitting on your doorstep and say nothing. The videos of the carrier, the finger on the trigger talk, the sermons, that's all about projecting strength and maintaining domestic authority.
But for the U.S., this is a serious dilemma. You've got this maximum pressure campaign with the sanctions.
And you've got the military projection with the carrier. The dilemma is the balance. If the U.S. pushes too hard, if they actually strike a base, they risk the very thing they say they want to protect: stability.
A conflict that spikes oil prices and puts those trillion-dollar investments at risk is a strategic failure for the U.S.
It is. It's a high-wire act.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the wild card: Israel. If Turkey is right and Israel's looking for a reason to jump in, well, that could take the control right out of Washington's hands.
That has to be the nightmare scenario for U.S. planners.
Yeah.
The U.S. wants to control the tempo, but if Israel initiates, the U.S. is forced to react.
It's a complete loss of control.
Okay, so let's map out what could happen. Based on everything we're seeing, what are the likely scenarios moving forward from today?
I think you can break it down into three main possibilities. Scenario one is what you could call controlled military escalation.
And what would that look like?
The U.S. launches a limited punitive strike, maybe against specific missile sites. Iran then retaliates against a specific U.S. base. It's incredibly high risk, but it stays conventional.
Like a boxing match. Both sides land a punch, then step back.
That's the ideal, but war rarely follows a script. And that leads to scenario two, the proxy war.
Where the U.S. decides not to strike Iran directly.
Right. Maybe because of the UAE's airspace denial, or the economic risks are too high. So instead, clashes erupt between, say, Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, or U.S. forces and militias in Syria.
So the conflict stays just below the threshold of all-out war, but the region still burns.
Correct. The oil keeps flowing for the most part, but the instability is off the charts. And then there's scenario three, diplomatic standoff.
And this is where the UAE's move pays off for them.
Exactly. The Gulf states successfully lobby Washington to cool down. The carrier stays, the insults fly back and forth, but the missiles stay in their silos. The tension just keeps simmering.
I feel like there's a fourth option here, or at least a risk factor. The one mistake theory.
That is the most dangerous factor of all. You have the IRGC with their fingers on triggers. You have commercial airlines avoiding the area because the airspace is so crowded with military hardware. All it takes is one miscalculation.
One accidental intercept.
One nervous radar operator.
Yeah.
And suddenly, scenario one happens whether the leaders in Washington or Tehran wanted to or not.
History is certainly full of wars that started by accident during a standoff.
That's right, not by some grand planned invasion.
So to recap where we are today, the USS Abraham Lincoln is offshore. The U.S. has sanctioned the shadow fleet, keeping Iran's economy alive. Commercial flights are being grounded. And the threat has evolved from "we will hit your bases" to "we will burn your investment."
That's the board. And the pieces are moving very, very fast.
So what's the final takeaway? For someone trying to make sense of all this, what does this shift in rhetoric actually mean for the future?
I think it signals that modern wars are becoming total wars of economics. The target isn't just the soldier anymore, it's the shareholder. It's the supply chain. It's the stability of the entire global market.
Iran knows they can't match the U.S. missile for missile,
So they're threatening to just blow up the whole game board instead.
which is a terrifyingly effective strategy.
It is, and it raises a really provocative question that I think we should leave everyone with.
Let's hear it.
We saw the UAE refuse its airspace. We saw Turkey warn against an Israeli strike. We're seeing U.S. allies prioritize their own economic safety over U.S. strategic goals. So the question is the U.S. losing its traditional ability to control the Middle East chessboard? Or is this just a new, far more dangerous phase of negotiation where Washington has to actually listen instead of just command?
That is a question that I think is going to be answered in the next few weeks. We'll be watching the oil markets and we'll be watching the flight schedules.
Because right now, those are the real indicators of what happens next.
Absolutely. Watch the money and watch the skies. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll catch you on the next one.